Hello. We have been discussing about the early Greek philosophers, and we continue our journey today with yet another very interesting early Greek philosopher called Anaxagoras. This is Dr. Ananya Barua, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. Anaxagoras. Who is Anaxagoras, and what is it so thrilling and interesting about these particular early Greek philosopher? Anaxagoras of Clazomenae was a pre-Socratic philosopher who introduced a radically new way of thinking about nature and the cosmos. He belonged to the timeline of 500 to 428 BCE or near about. He is often remembered for being the first to bring philosophy to Athens, influencing key figures such as Pericles and Socrates, and for introducing the concept of nous, mind or intellect, as the ultimate cause and ordering principle of the cosmos. Who were the first or the initial teachers of Anaxagoras, or who were those minds that Anaxagoras was deeply influenced to have come up with something called nous? Now, there are no as such definitive historical records about a specific teacher of Anaxagoras or specific minds, but several indirect influences are likely that of Thales, who had said that water was the arche, Anaximander for his indefinite apeiron as origin, Anaximenes as air as the fundamental principle, Heraclitus, who had emphasized on flux and the logos. Now, Anaxagoras, in all possibility, had studied in Athens, where he taught Pericles, Euripides, and indirectly influenced Socrates. While not formally apprenticed, Anaxagoras absorbed and responded to the Milesian and the Eleatic traditions, particularly Parmenides, whose emphasis on being he critiques. So then our question further is, why is Anaxagoras a much celebrated philosopher? Anaxagoras is celebrated for several key philosophical breakthroughs. First, introduction of nous as a cosmic principle. First philosopher to introduce a rational, intelligent, ordering principle in the cosmos. He stated, quote, "All things were together, then mind came and set them in order," unquote. This line appears in the context of Anaxagoras' cosmological theory, where he tries to explain how order and structure emerged from a primordial state of undifferentiated chaos. Now, this primordial state is what we know as, quote, within quotes, "all things were together." According to Anaxagoras, before the cosmos, everything existed in a mixed, undivided state, a kind of primordial soup. In this state, there were no separate substances. All opposites, hot, cold, wet, dry, were blended. Everything contained a portion of everything else. This was his pluralistic doctrine of infinite seeds. This concept anticipates modern ideas of the anthropic or undifferentiated origin of matter. Secondly, the intervention of nous. Then mind came and set them in order, within quotes. This phrase basically means that unlike the earlier thinkers who attributed order to physical forces, like for instance water, air, love, strife, Anaxagoras postulated nous. An immaterial, infinite self ruled pure principle, unmixed with anything else, capable of initiating motion and bringing order to the chaos. Further, nous separated off further means that the mixture into distinct substances forming the cosmos as we know it, earth, heavens, animals, and human beings. This was the first philosophical concept of a rational organizing mind in Western thought. So we see that this shift was extremely rich philosophically because there had been a radical shift from material monism in Anaxagoras. Earlier philosophers like Thales, who talked about water, Anaximenes, who talks about air, and even Empedocles, who talks about the four elements plus forces, tried to reduce the world to material causes. Anaxagoras transcended material explanations by introducing a non-physical, intentional, rational force, nous. So nous as the first principle of motion, where Parmenides and Zeno argued that change is an illusion, Anaxagoras claimed that mind initiates real intelligible motion. Thus, he bridged the Eleatic denial of change and the Heraclitean celebration of flux. The third important point about Anaxagoras is he is the precursor to metaphysical and theological concepts. Plato's demiurge or Aristotle's unmoved mover and the Stoics' logos are all philosophical descendants of Anaxagoras' nous. Even the idea of a divine creator or rational God in later religious traditions finds philosophical roots in this innovation. Now, if we concentrate on the PPT as being displayed here, we see the interpretations and references. So, for the thinker Plato, who for example had written Phaedo, the interpretation has been about Socrates, who says that he was initially excited by Anaxagoras' idea that mind orders everything, but disappointed that Anaxagoras did not fully use it to explain why things are the way they are. Further, in Aristotle's Metaphysics 1.3, we see how Aristotle had praised Anaxagoras for introducing nous, but criticized him for not using it beyond cosmological initiation. Similarly, with Simplicius's commentary on Aristotle's physics, we do see where he preserves much of Anaxagoras' fragments, including this one, and emphasizes its revolutionary status in natural philosophy. Further, we see that Anaxagoras' legacy in the statement of all things were together, the philosophical significance has been that it reflects a pluralist ontology, infinite states mixed in a primordial state. Then mind came. Now this particular phrase indicates the introduction of nous, a radical idea of an active immaterial cause of motion and order. Further, set them in order, this phrase again means that it begins cosmic differentiation, the world becomes intelligible and structured. So we see that this one fragment encapsulates a foundational shift in Greek thought from mythos to logos, from chaos to cosmos, from meta to mind. This anticipates later metaphysical and theological ideas of a divine reason, which could be Plato's forms, Aristotelian unmoved mover, Stoic logos. The other interesting shift in Anaxagoras' philosophy has been pluralism over monism. Anaxagoras challenged monists like Parmenides and Empedocles and proposed that everything exists in everything. Infinite states constitute the material world. He stated that change is nothing but a rearrangement and not emergence from or into nothing. Anaxagoras stood at a turning point in ancient Greek philosophy, offering a response to the monism of Parmenides and the pluralism of Empedocles, while laying the foundation for a more nuanced and complex view of matter, motion and mind. Now at this juncture, we are good to know how did Anaxagoras challenge monists like Parmenides and Empedocles. Let us explore. Parmenides, as we know by now, had depicted that change is illusion, only one or being is real. Parmenides, again, to quickly recap, belonged to the timeline of 515 to 450 BCE, who had argued that being is one, unchanging, eternal, change, plurality, and becoming are illusions. The sensory world is deceptive, only rational thoughts reveal truth. Now, Anaxagoras' challenge has been that he affirms change and motion. Anaxagoras rejects the denial of motion and change. He acknowledges the observable world's complexity and offers nous or mind as the first mover. Further, Anaxagoras retains rationality but allows plurality. While respecting Parmenides' desire for a rational explanation, he expands ontology. Instead of a single unchanging being, he proposed an infinite plurality of substances, which was called as seeds. Unlike Empedocles' four roots, Anaxagoras says everything exists in everything, just in different proportions. Further, Anaxagoras overcomes the problem of origin. For Parmenides, what is cannot come from what is not. I repeat, what is cannot comes from what is not, that is, from nothing comes nothing. Anaxagoras elegantly avoids this trap by suggesting that everything was already present in the initial mixture, nothing new comes into being. Things only become distinct through separation. Thus, he preserves the logic of being while accounting for change and diversity in the world. Now, about Parmenides, we have had seen how Anaxagoras did have some reservations and how he did respond. Now we will be seeing how he did have reservations with Empedocles too, and what were his responses. Empedocles' philosophy is known for the four elements plus the two forces, love and strife. Empedocles had proposed that the four eternal elements, earth, water, air, fire, are the base of all things, and the two opposing forces, love and strife, combine and separate them. Now, Anaxagoras' challenges has been that he goes beyond the four elements. Anaxagoras rejects the idea that only four substances can explain all material diversity. He proposes infinite basic substances. For instance, bone is made of bone seed, flesh of flesh seed, and so on. These seeds are qualitatively distinct, not reducible to four elements. Further, Anaxagoras replaces mythic forces with rational nous. Empedocles' forces are quasi-mythical. Anaxagoras introduces nous, which is a purely rational, non-material principle that initiates the motion of the cosmos. Nous is intentional, orderly, and intelligent, not a force driven by mythic passion or strife. This was a move towards philosophical abstraction and non-mythical causality. Then we do see the infinite seeds, or what were Anaxagoras' insights. Anaxagoras did say that in everything there is a portion of everything. So what are these infinite seeds? Anaxagoras observed that hair grows from food, flesh from food, nails from food, and so on. How can diverse things arise from the same food? Anaxagoras' conclusion has been food must contain seeds of everything, but in varying proportions. So everything, even a loaf of bread, contains infinitely divisible parts of all substances: gold, fire, bone, mind, you just name it. These are called homomeries. Homomeries. In Greek, it means substances composed of like parts. Now, the philosophical insight that we see is of continuity of nature, where nature is not made of totally separate elements, but of infinitely divisible interwoven principles. Every bit of matter contains a trace of all. Now, what is this qualitative pluralism? in the Anaxagoras' philosophical insight. Now, the world is not built on one or four substances, but on an unlimited plurality of distinct seeds. And what about the quantitative differentiation? Anaxagoras says that what makes something flesh or bone is not exclusive essence, but relative proportion of those seeds in a thing. So he was also quick to state that there cannot be no generation or destruction, where he said that there is no birth or death, but mixing and separation. Echoing and refining Parmenides, he claimed nothing comes from nothing. Change is rearrangement of what's already present. Mind is separate and pure. The only thing not mixed with anything else is nous. It alone has the power to set motion in the universe. It is the agent of order and separation. Now, in the PPT that is being displayed here, we do see this aspect, the Parmenides' Empedocles and Anaxagoras, and we see that the aspect of ontology, for Parmenides it is one eternal being. For Empedocles it is four elements, and for Anaxagoras it is infinite seeds. Now, the aspect of view of change for Parmenides, it is illusion. For Empedocles, it is real via love or strife, and for Anaxagoras, again, it is real via nous. Now, for Anaxagoras, the source of motion for Parmenides is nous or static. For Empedocles, it is love and strife, and for Anaxagoras, it is nous or mind. Similarly, for the nature of reality, for Parmenides, it is undivided, changeless. For Empedocles, it is elemental cycles, and for Anaxagoras, it is intermixture and proportion. The legacy in Parmenides, we see that it is rational metaphysics. For Empedocles, it is proto-science with myth. For Anaxagoras, it is irrational pluralism and proto-psychology. So we see that Anaxagoras did explain about the rational and naturalistic cosmology, and explained the celestial phenomena of eclipses, meteors, sunspots without mythology, and this has been an advancement over Empedocles' philosophy, who did use mythos in his explanations. Anaxagoras proposed that the sun was a fiery stone, a radical departure from divine explanations. Anaxagoras, as we know, has been a pioneer of rational and naturalistic cosmology, one of the first to challenge mythological explanations of the heavens using reason, observation, and theoretical insight. This marked a foundational shift in Western philosophy and science, away from divine mythos and towards logos or reasoned discourse. Now that we do have some idea about Anaxagoras' insights and his philosophical interpretations, we are good to understand how did Anaxagoras explain the celestial phenomena naturally and not mythologically. For he did make an advancement over Empedocles, who did use some traces of mythology in his explanations. Now, for Anaxagoras, the sun as a fiery stone. The sun is a red-hot mass of iron larger than the Peloponnesus, which means that the traditional Greek view of Homer and Hesiod, the sun was a god, Helios driving a golden chariot across the sky. Anaxagoras replaced this with a material physical object. He said that the sun is no god, the sun is not a deity, but a burning rock. Its heat and light are natural emissions, not divine gifts. This separated the cosmic objects from gods, replacing anthropomorphic explanations with natural causes. Further, about the solar eclipses, he had said that they occur when the moon comes between the earth and the sun. Lunar eclipse, he said, it occurs when the earth comes between the sun and the moon. And before Anaxagoras, eclipses were seen as omens, punishments by gods, or supernatural portents. Anaxagoras used geometry and shadow to explain eclipses as physical interpositions of celestial bodies. Also, Anaxagoras explained that the moon does not shine by itself but reflects sunlight. The phases are due to the changing angle of sunlight hitting the moon as it orbits Earth. This was empirical reasoning based on observed regularity, light behavior, and spatial relation. Further, about the meteors and falling stars, Anaxagoras declared that meteors are stones falling from the sky, not divine signs. And one of the famous cases when a meteorite fell at Agospotami around 467 BCE, Anaxagoras correctly described it as a celestial rock dislodged from orbit and not a divine weapon or omen. And about stars and moon and celestial bodies, Anaxagoras claims that the stars and moons are composed of the same material as Earth, only they appear small because of distance. Anaxagoras challenged the belief that celestial bodies were pure, unchanging ether or divine beings. Now, if we look at the PPT as being displayed here, we see that Anaxagoras' rationalistic cosmology, the key features have been about the feature of sun, mythological worldview where God, and Anaxagoras' natural view has been about fiery rock, huge and far. Moonlight, he owns a divine glow. Anaxagoras heats reflected sunlight. Eclipses, omens from God. Anaxagoras' natural shadow events. About the stars, mythological worldview has been about divine fires. Anaxagoras' naturalistic view has been distant fiery rocks. Meteors for mythological worldview have been the portents. For Anaxagoras' naturalistic view has been the falling cosmic stones. The cosmic order for mythological worldview has been considered as divine will or chaos. Anaxagoras' view has been clearly that it has been organized by NOUS. So we see that Anaxagoras posited NOUS as the arche, the first principle or originating source, in a way that both continued and radically transformed the pre-Socratic tradition. Now, before Anaxagoras, early Greek philosophers were engaged in a common project, finding the fundamental principle behind all reality. As explained, we did mention how it was water for Thales, air for Anaximenes, fire and flux for Heraclitus, being, which was eternal and unchanging for Parmenides, and the four elements plus the opposing forces of love and strife as forces for Empedocles. Now, these archai were typically material substances or cosmic forces, and thinkers were wrestling with the paradox of change and permanence. How can there be change if all being is one and unchanging? How can we explain the diversity of the world from a single substance? So, Anaxagoras' solution has been the introduction of NOUS as arche, and he did respond that the only way out to dissolve or to resolve this issue is when we bring in the non-material substance called NOUS or mind. We will be discussing more about NOUS in our next lecture. Thank you so much.